I wanted to actually first talk about how we met. We met at the Napa Valley Conference.
Oh, that's right.
And we were, in fact, taking a class from the really wonderful Dana Levin. And you just stood out to me because, like, you're just hilarious, and you were just like, a pro, at the conference. And I always knew you as Donna, but I saw your last name, and I was just like, I don't know how to pronounce that. So I remember actually like following you to a reading just so that I can hear you actually say your own name. Would you do that for us so the audience would know how to pronounce your name? Yeah.
Donna Spruijt-Metz.
And Sprout is Dutch. You were living in Amsterdam, right? And at that time you were a flutist.
While I was being a professional flutist in Holland, got my bachelor's, master's, and PhD in psychology and medical ethics there.
And then you came here, and then you joined the program at USC.
Right. I was at a couple of other universities first, but USC within a year of us coming here.
You recently retired?
Yes. I switched jobs, as my husband says. Now I'm full frontal poetry.
But while you were a director of the mHealth Collaboratory at USC, how did you actually keep your poetry alive?
Conferences. I went to Breadloaf most summers since 2013. The grind, the daily grind, which I now help run. Poetry community. Many of them who I met at Breadloaf, and now some in LA, like you. People that I write with, people that I exchange things with. Community's everything.
Your love of actually building community was very strong from the beginning. And in fact, didn't you put together readings here for certain poets who later on became very well known?
Yes.
Do you want to kind of talk about how that came about and like who they were?
Chevalier's bookstore used to be really poet friendly. I mean, it's changed a little bit, but the wonderful woman who ran it, Liz, who died, we became friends, and her poetry collection was terrible. I said, can we do something about this? So she let me suggest poets, and then there were poets I was reading, and like two in particular stand out, Chen Chen and Kaveh Akbar, that had chapbooks, but I thought they were great. So I wondered if I could bring them out. And I had, at the time, as Dr. Metz, I had a center with money, and I could do STEAM events, science, technology, engineering, art, and math, and bring them out, pay for it, and then they would do some talk, and then read at Chevalier's.
You have seen a lot of a string of publications in the past 5 years. Slippery Surfaces, which is a chapbook, and Haunt the World, which is a collaborative chapbook with Flower Conroy, and Dear Ghost, which is an online-only chapbook, which actually can be downloaded for free. And all of this led up to the release of this wonderful, wonderful collection that we're going to talk about today, general release from the beginning of the world. In Slippery Surfaces, there were already a couple of poems that were in there that made it into the general collection, right? And those were, I think the standout ones were about the mother-daughter relationship. Do you want to talk about how the collection really has been shaped by the absence of your father?
General release has several strands in it. One of them is an ongoing discussion with whatever you just think of as holy. And definitely two of them even one is the relationship with my mother, which was difficult, and the relationship with my father, who is dead and has been dead since I was 6. I really found it difficult to write about that, both of those things, and God, that's easy for me. Wake me up in the middle of the night and I'll write you a poem about God. But finding the right way this book has had several versions, and I think 6 titles, and only the last version, which was taken right away, had the poems in it that really function to talk about my mother and my father. And those are artifact poems. Those are ekphrastic poems. And I finally, actually a poet friend of mine, Allison Albino, hats off Allison, she was using pictures to try and get out her feelings about her family and writing poems. And I talked to her one day. I said, the book, it will not cooperate. I can't get those poems that I write about my mom and my dad are terrible, yet they need to be in there. And she said, why don't you try using artifacts? And I thought, because at the same time, we were finally cleaning out my closet, and I had boxes and boxes from my mother, who had been dead like 17 years. But I just couldn't face going through it. But now it was cluttering up my life. Not just my spiritual life, but my closet. And so my husband and I started going through them. And as he watched this process, he said, he really kind of didn't trust me to not just throw everything away. So he was the fire master. Some things needed to go into we actually had like one of those solo stoves outside. He was the fire master, and I would say, oh, this. He'd say, you sure you want to burn your father's death certificate? It's like, okay, maybe not that. And through that process, and there were many pictures there, I found the pieces that elicited what I needed to say. I couldn't have done it without the artifacts. Obit. Sometimes I think it is in the blood. You do what you can, and then one day you cancel out. The resistance falls away. 37, 70. There's no real difference. There's no real waiting. My mother was wrong, whispering to me on a tram in Amsterdam, you're already 33. You're going to make it. We're going to be okay. I didn't understand, but now I do. She thought if I made it to 37, I would be safe, over the threshold, free from the family curse. But no, I didn't pass any threshold. It's always there, the door, open, not like the long disappeared envelopes, the ones that were sealed. The door is there, unsealed, sometimes barely perceptible, sometimes full and wide and vibrant. In the night, or after dinner, over a drink, or in the quiet morning, it is always there, waiting. This morning, the coffee was delicious, and the pups anointed my face in their saliva. This morning, I didn't step through.
It's an amazing poem.
Thank you.
Thank you for reading that. For you to actually really think about these artifacts and like the relationship with your family, did you find studying the psalm to be comforting? How did that come about?
My psalm study?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I've been studying some part of Torah, which is the Hebrew Bible, for decades. And then at some point, a group of women friends pulled together and started studying Torah together every Thursday night. And we did that for a long time. We actually wrote kind of a book together. And then one of the women's sons committed suicide. And in her grief, she pulled together a smaller group of us to study Psalms together. So it was for her grief.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, also a suicide. And that was how the Psalm study, and that we've been doing that for now 7 years.
And when you decide to actually really start writing poems directly, sort of addressing and in communication with the divine, and I love how in the book, it's very clear that it is not just the second person pronoun. It is not just like the editorial you. It is, the you is always all capitalized. So there is no mistake that, we know that who you're talking to.
We know who you are.
Yeah, exactly. And there's, and because it's a communication, it's a conversation with the divine, the moods are wide-ranging. you know, and then a part of me also feel as if like there is a conversation that's going on to directed at somebody that's not there, right? But always there. And I thought there was like a parallel to how you need to get that out with the absence of your father. Was that like intentional? Did the poems come about before, in terms of their development, I should say?
Before what?
Before some of the other poems with your mother and your father.
Well, they're ongoing. I'm still writing them. And I've been writing them since, well, I guess since we started studying Psalms, because of the way that we study them. We do a process called Lectio Divina, which is deep study of each line, and you write your own version as we work together. And some of those have become poems.
Oh, that's really interesting. So
It's very cool.
It's almost like a creative writing exercise.
Almost, yeah. And everybody in the room is doing it for a different reason. I'm the only poet in the group, but there's another writer, and there's a rabbi, and there's a novelist, and there's an art therapist. So everybody's got their own angle coming in. It's beautiful work.
That really ties in nicely with one of the beginning God poems, which is on page 2, the second one.
Yeah.
Would you please read that one for us?
It is not a psalm. Just to say that some of the wrestling that I do with whatever you think of as holy is not in psalm form, but I'm always arguing with God. It's not, we argue. We have words. Okay. So before I read this poem, there are a couple of things you need to know. You explained the you in this poem, which is whatever you think is holy. There's also the Esnoga, which is a synagogue in Amsterdam that's 400 years old that somehow managed to survive the Blitz and the war. And it's beautiful. And it's got this milky glass. It's amazing. And then the last thing you need to know is Jenever. Jenever is a Dutch gin of sorts, and it's my favorite drink. And it's very Dutch. Okay. God in Amsterdam. The Esnoga. See time's horses slipping down your holy walls. The 400-year-old bricks and glass, Sabbath's opaque light, filling the women's balcony. No service now, just this milky glow. The Torah quiet in its closed ark. Hello, God, I say, come on out. I know you are here somewhere. After all, if this is your house, the least you could do is offer me a drink. Have a drink, you say. You sit down in the deafening rustle of your knot robes, pour good Jenever into fine small glasses, and there we are, going at it, shot to shot. Finally, someone I can't drink under the table. You pour another, we are jolly. You answer all my questions about death. Okay, about my own death, about your laws. I mean, are they really yours, or did we just make them up? And peace, why is it so hard? And kindness, and the dew on the morning grasses. You keep up a steady stream of Jenever, making sure I'm too drunk to remember your answers.
Amazing. Thank you for reading that. And there's the other relationship here, which looms large, right? And which is the relationship between a daughter and a mother. And one of the most visually, the forms are amazing. So like your eyes are never bored when you go from one page to another because you make use of the spaces in such a creative way. The one that I think is almost like a visual art piece is the Daughter and Mother Amsterdam tram poems.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about how that came about? Because it's not really readable.
Can't read it out loud.
You can't read it out loud.
I've never read it out loud.
Yeah, it's like because like it's almost not possible unless like it becomes like a play with 3 voices or something. And that's I think what's really striking about it, and a lot of things, of course, are not being said. And that's a whole of, and it's a journey as well. It's a literal journey, going to, getting on a tram.
It's tram 4.
Yeah.
And it's the old route. And that's the route that I was on with my mother when I finally cornered her and could ask her questions about how my father really died. I mean, I was 6. On the tram with my mother, I had been living in Holland for a long time. I was 33. And the conversation went kind of like the poem, which is every tram stop gets called out. The tram stops, the doors open, people get out, people get in, tram. And then you go to the next stop. And in between, I would ask her something. She would answer the answer. So we had this very, pun intended, halting discussion. And what you see is that you go from tram stop to tram stop to tram stop, and you come around to the first stop again. And that's where we get out. That's the story. And it took me some digging to find the route, because the routes have been changed. So.
How many poems of tram poems are, I believe I counted 4. Am I
there
wrong?
are 4, and how they got spread out through the book, is that a question?
Yes, you read my mind. Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting one. So these are also in Slippery Surfaces, and it was one poem. And God bless Maggie Smith, who read Slippery Surfaces for me. And she said, you know what you ought to do? So this was all her. She said, you should split it up. And so I did. And then when this book was being put together for the 33,000th time, I thought, I don't feel like there are sections. I feel like I need punctuation. I thought, I know, let's do the tram poems. And that was the perfect thing to do. So each section is sort of punctuated with a tram poem.
Of course, because I don't speak Dutch, I kind of struggled with the station names, but I did try to see if they were repeating. So that one was kind of fun for me. So later on, I was like, wait, actually, even though I can't really pronounce this, I feel like I've seen the station name before, and I'll go back. And it was a circle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought that was really interesting. Yeah.
Because we ended out where we started, in many ways.
Mm-hmm. Where were the artifacts that you were going through?
My mother's effects, all of it. Mm-hmm. So when she died, there were boxes and we were storing them. I didn't have the strength. Mm-hmm. And there was so much stuff, and we just put it in storage. And 11 years into that, my husband said, I'm not paying for this anymore. It's $80 a month. So then we started going through them. And that's where they came.
So even though the mother figure never really wanted to give you an answer about what actually had happened, there were in fact proofs of it in forms that you could have discovered.
I could have known, yeah.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, then I went through some of the other stuff that I had that my aunts had sent me that I just hadn't read. And there were newspaper, Obit is one of the newspaper articles that it turns out that I had for years.
Yeah.
That there were letters left for many of us, including myself, that my mother destroyed.
And some of them were in fact lost.
No, she destroyed them.
Yeah, yeah.
More than lost.
So there's something about that absence that's never going to be completely come to a neat little ending. But that mystery also is the reason why I think I find that trajectory so interesting. Is that, we almost know that it's not going to get resolved. But there's an attempt and the ongoing conversation with it.
Lee Young Lee says in an interview that he did with Ilya Kaminsky, he wants to be a poet of praise and joy, but he knows he has a long way to go. I find him very praiseful and joyous. But I too would like to be a poet of praise and joy. And I would like to rehabilitate my mother in some way, because she was a young mother whose husband committed suicide and left her a mess. So it was hard for her. It was hard for her to deal with me because she could hardly deal with herself.
The poet seems to also be starting to look at her own daughter, right? And and how that reflects almost or like informs the poet's relationship with her mother, you know. And there are 4 daughter poems in here. The one that I would like you to read is The Green Before Her.
There are a couple of things you need to know about this poem. I talk about the polder, which is the reclaimed land of the Netherlands, which is where I lived at the time. And I talk about the dikes. The dikes in Holland are built in waves of 3. So the one closest to the ocean that's holding the ocean out is called the waker. That one's awake at all times. And then further back is the second dike, and that's called the sleeper. And then the third dike, where the actual cities can begin, is called the dreamer. So it's the waker, the sleeper, and the dreamer. Those are the 3 dikes. And the other thing you need to know is that I wrote this poem when I was in Iceland. So I'm reflecting on Holland, but I'm in Iceland. The green before her. I remember other mornings before she was born. This same green, those mornings without, where the only darkness comes from within. Frosted mist rising over the sleeper dike, out across the polder for miles, nothing but grasses and marshlands, godwins and willows, the herons still as statues, sun readying herself for dew. Before I was a mother, all I saw in the polder was lack of music, markets, bookstores, concerts, crowded French fry stands, no tourists bumping their roller bags along the cobblestones, taking selfies in front of the canals, no people busking on the museum plain, no church bells' insistence, no trams clanging along the rails, no children skating on the Sarfati Park. This morning, from 4,000 miles away, glaciers on the morning skyline, I'm holding the idea of her as lightly as I can. Yes, from her birth, she was always already moving away from me and into her own life, while I began the long strain, the pull against the mud of me, against that of which she was made. She, in her mercy, always circling back before arcing out again, each arc wider than the last. But it was me, wasn't it? Always moving away from her, steadily towards the abyss that will one day be my own. And then I think, of course, it's never just one body in motion, is it? If there's a light fading, it was always mine.
Talk to me about the function of like the daughter poems and how they ended up in the collection.
She's been such a teacher for me in my life. I think in all of the poems about my daughter, I'm learning from her, even the one when she's in my belly. You know, and you, I don't know what you need. I don't know you yet.
I also wanted to ask you about your upbringing, because even though you had a lot of interest in studying the Torah and the Psalms, you didn't grow up in a religious household,
Oh,
right?
no, I did not. My family was what they call culturally Jewish. They were Jews. We had Passover of a form. But my dad was in D-Day too, and my mother was in USO camp shows. She was a jazz pianist and singer. So they had seen the Second World War. As far as they were concerned, God was dead. And yet they were persecuted as Jews. So my father was an architect. He was really did construction, built houses. And we lived on the Balboa Peninsula where he built the waterfront houses, but Jews weren't allowed to buy them. We weren't allowed to be members of the yacht club. My mother was a sailor. She loved boats. There were 2 Jews in my schools growing up, 2 of us, all through high school. So, hey, if I'm going to be persecuted for this, I want to know what it is. And also, I was fascinated by it always. So when I asked my mom, I said, I want to go to, all these people are going to Sunday school. I want to go to Jewish Sunday school. And she said, fine. But at the time, there were not many Jews in Orange County. I know it's hard to believe, but at the time, she had to drive all the way from Balboa Peninsula to Santa Ana to find a temple, or at least and she would, unload me there and wait for me in the car, but she would not come in.
The psalm poems, of course, I love them, and so like to actually isolate just one, I have to say it was a little bit difficult, but like the one that really spoke to me, which is everywhere.
Inside your tents, which are everywhere, you are passing out first aid kits, blankets, inhalers, taking on your many forms that we are so slow to recognize. You pulling like a compass, a vortex, a tornado, but so much stillness, and in the eye of it, the sparrow makes her nest, deposits her young, as if safe, because everywhere, because nowhere, and now how fragile your endless silence, the whir of it, which is everywhere, the whir of my prayers. If praise is what you want, come and get it, but please leave the bird in peace. Her eggs are roundness, so essential, rolling through my heart's highways, looking for signs on how to use this strength that you have provided. Enough to cross over to you, the fragrant trees. I have so much to learn. The pain you have provided has honed my senses. I'm here now. Your rains, which are everywhere, are harsh. I scamper towards cover, caught in your deluge and drenched. Allow me to hesitate. Before I enter your sun, before I need to be mindful and upright, let me rest my imperfections. Let me be wet and silent at your threshold, which is everywhere.
This is really a poem of praise,
Yes.
So, yeah, a poet of praise. I see it. I'm actually looking forward to seeing you at more writing conventions.
We do have a good time.
We always have a good time
Yeah.
at writing conventions. So, Breadloaf is the one that I haven't gone to yet.
Oh, it's fantastic.
But I will be there if you're there.
I'm not going this year.
Okay, then forget this year.
I've been to conference after conference after conference because it's sort of sustenance for me, but now that I'm full frontal poetry, I can spend more time with poets. And so we are going on a do-it-yourself retreat for a month to Taos to write and think. And
Amazing.
so I won't be at Breadloaf this year.
Do you need somebody to actually go and drink your gin for you? Just let me know. Thank you.
Thank you so much.